All right, here we go. Good evening, virtual audience, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Kate Bruns, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I am so pleased to introduce this event with Gail Caldwell, celebrating the launch of her new memoir, Bright Precious Thing, joined in conversation by Gloria Steinem. Through virtual events like tonight's, Harvard Bookstore continues to bring authors and their work to our community and our new digital community during these unprecedented times. We host virtual events like tonight's 5 times a week. And as always, you can find our event schedule on our website at harvard.com/events, where you can sign up for our email newsletter and browse our bookshelves from home. This evening's discussion will conclude with some time for your questions. If you have a question for our speakers at any time during the talk tonight, please submit it through the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. We're going to get through as many as time allows. In the Zoom chat box tonight, I will also be sharing a link to purchase tonight's featured book, Bright Precious Thing. All sales through this link support Harvard Bookstore, so a huge thank you for your support during this difficult time. Your purchases and your financial contributions, there will also be a donate link in the Zoom chat, make this virtual author series possible, and now more than ever support the future of a landmark independent bookstore. And for those of you participating in Blackout Day in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, this link to purchase the book will still be available in the coming weeks. We sincerely appreciate everyone's support now and always. And finally, as you might have experienced in virtual gatherings these last few weeks, technical issues can arise. If they do, we're going to do our best to resolve them quickly, so thank you for your patience and understanding. And now I am very honored to introduce tonight's speakers. Gail Caldwell is the former chief book critic of the Boston Globe, where she was a staff writer and critic for more than 20 years. During that time, she was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for criticism for her insightful observations on contemporary life and literature. She's the New York Times best-selling author of 3 previous memoirs, Let's Take the Long Way Home, New Life, No Instructions, and A Strong West Wind. Of Gail's writing, Kate Bullock writes in the New York Times Book Review, it brims with insight and wisdom. As far as I'm concerned, Caldwell can write about whatever she pleases. Gail will be joined on screen tonight by political activist, feminist organizer, and author Gloria Steinem. A founder of both Miss and New York magazines, as well as many organizations and foundations, she's also the author of the memoir, My Life on the Road, among others. In 2013, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom as well. Tonight, the two will be discussing Gail's new memoir, Bright Precious Thing, which is a personal odyssey through the women's movement, a resonant book in the Me Too era, a reminder of life's preciousness, and a small tribute to her Samoyed Tula, who I know is at home with Gail tonight. We are so delighted to hear the perspectives of both of our speakers bring to this memoir and the surrounding discussion tonight. It really is an honor to host them virtually. So without further ado, the digital podium is yours, Gail and Gloria.
Thank you so much, Kate. You know, one of the things that I don't particularly love about Zoom is that I don't get to see all the wonderful people who I know have signed on for this. And I really love doing readings and looking out at the audience and seeing people smile or wave in return. So I'm going to pretend that Gloria and I are sitting somewhere wonderful and talking, and the rest of you are listening in. I owe a huge debt to Harvard Bookstore for doing this. I've launched every book with them, and they're my hometown bookstore. I owe a much greater debt to Gloria Steinem, not just for being here tonight, but for being who she is. And I'm grateful for that too. So we have a lot to talk about. I feel enormously moved by her presence here. And I think what I will do, just because it will get me sort of going and get the conversation going, I'm going to read about a 3-minute reading of a chapter that is what prompted the beginning of this book. It's a conversation that I had with Louise Erdrich many years ago, and I was telling her about this part of my life. And she said, "You have to write about this. You have to write about this." And that was many years ago. And I wound up writing about it, and it turned into the book. It's why the book is dedicated to her. And I actually want to dedicate this short reading, which you will see why in a minute, to the Supreme Court. And on that note, Austin, Texas, 1970. One morning on the way to Latin class, I found $7 lying on the grassy mall. My heart fluttered when I saw the money, and I reached to pick it up. I needed it for the illegal abortion I was having in a couple of weeks. I was 19 and 6 weeks pregnant and not in love, and my ex-boyfriend and I were planning to drive to Mexico, where you could get the procedure done for $160. We had agreed to split the cost. To get my share, I had been going without lunch and typing student term papers for $10 apiece. Now, with the $7, I was halfway there. I had moved to Austin several months earlier and met a tall, soft-voiced fellow who had just returned from studying French literature at the Sorbonne. We smoked dope together and sat on the grounds of the Capitol, listening to music and speeches about smashing imperialism. And evenings we would go back to his place and make a gentle, not very interesting love to the background swoon of the Moody Blues. He introduced me to Sartre and sometimes mumbled to me in French during sex, which thrilled me, but only for a while. He was mellow but controlling, a lethal combination I spotted pretty quickly. I had plenty of half-doomed relationships still ahead of me, but even then I knew the satin-voiced version of prison was not for me. Within a few months, we would each move on to other gardens. He to a pretty hippie girl with long braids and a quiet demeanor, I to my first women's liberation rally. But a couple of weeks after we'd broken up, my period was late. The bright, somehow affirming blood flow didn't show. I'm late. That was how we put it back then. And I doubt any two words were as frightening to a young woman of that time and place, when the future unfurled with some promise and some risk, but certainly alternatives to the shotgun marriages of our mothers. I'm late was the female equivalent of being 1A. Your future revealed with a draft notice or a pregnancy test done at a doctor's office with the attendant tight-lipped judgment. We were 3 years away from Roe v. Wade, and if somewhere in the glistening years of youth you didn't get your period, the options were draconian. Become a mother when you were still a child, carry to term and give the baby up for adoption, or risk your life in an illegal, difficult to find medical procedure. I chose the last.
Thank you so much for reading that. I'm sure that so many of the people watching, me, I mean, if something like 1 in 4 American women has needed an abortion at some time in her life, when it was illegal, it was 1 in 3.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And, that is, and it was a turning point in my life too. And I think we're seeing it over again, of course, because even though the belief that we should be able to decide the fate of our own bodies, whether we're women and men, is sort of the basis of democracy, and most people agree with it. It is, for instance, it remains the one issue on which religious groups, evangelicals and others, will support Trump even though they don't agree with him on anything else.
Right.
So it is the first step. I mean, controlling reproduction is the first step in pretty much every hierarchy I've ever been aware of. And of course, if there's racism or caste, as in India, then it becomes even more important.
Exactly.
Able to control and keep castes and races separate in order to maintain those hierarchies too. So I'm so glad you began with that, because it is fundamental to our lives, fundamental to our political systems, fundamental to everybody's freedom. No, I thank you for that.
And I also remember, I mean, when I was writing about this, I remember, because I was a broke college student, and of course it was 1970, but $7 then felt like an enormous amount of money. And so abortions are now under such attack for poor women, or women in rural areas, or women who don't have access to the same freedoms that somebody in a city, in a progressive part of the world, has the economic freedom to purchase. So
yes, and it is. I mean, I wish we learned what in my day they called political science. Do they still call it that instead of government? I don't know, but it's not a science. But because we sort of take patriarchy for granted in some ways, and so we don't start our study of politics with that as we should. But it is, as I was saying, the first step in every hierarchy. And in fact, not to be too depressing here, but it was the first, among the first official acts that Hitler took after he was elected, and he was elected, was to padlock the family planning clinics and declare abortion against a crime against the state, with the death penalty for the doctor and imprisonment for the woman, because then she could be forced to have children in prison. Of course, we're talking about Aryan women, I'm sure, but you know, because we happen to have the one thing that nobody else has, which is wombs, then controlling those wombs becomes the first step in hierarchy, and our getting the ability to just make decisions over our own bodies is the first step in democracy.
It's so startling to me that, I mean, I remember being 19 and scared, and also having absolutely no compunction about what I was doing. The notion of having a child, either with this man or on my own, I was a child at having a child. I would have been a child having a child. So I read this piece actually when I was first starting the book at a reading somewhere that, as it turned out, inadvertently had a lot of people of Catholic faith in the audience. And once I realized that, I didn't apologize, but I said at the beginning, I hope this doesn't offend anyone. It's my truth, and I need to share it with you. And then I looked up and saw two young women who were crying during the reading. And I realized, and one of them took me aside later, and it had a huge struggle over this issue, and asked me if it was, I mean, I think that she, because of the way the patriarchy still makes these assumptions about infanticide and religious beliefs and all the other things that get slung our way, she wanted me some assurance that she was going to be okay, that she wasn't going to go to hell, that she was going to be able to have her own family someday, even though she was 18 now, and it didn't fit into her life plan at that age. And I spent a lot of time with her talking about the women I knew and the daughters who I knew and loved, and the fact that, you know, you were not some Jezebel monster if you made this choice.
No, on the contrary. I mean, it's a kind of responsibility to not give birth until you're ready to give birth. And actually, thanks to a wonderful Catholic priest named Father Harvey Egan from Minneapolis, I learned that the Catholic Church was not against abortion originally. In fact, they regulated abortion, so it was okay to abort a male fetus or a female fetus longer than a male fetus. I mean, thinking that male fetuses were superior, they wrongly thought that you could tell that a male fetus quickened earlier. But it was Pope Pius IX and Napoleon III. And Napoleon III, there had been Napoleonic Wars, so the French population was decimated, and the birth rate wasn't what Napoleon III thought it should be for armies and so on. And they traded. I mean, they made an agreement that Pope Pius IX would declare abortion a mortal sin. I'm not sure about birth control, but at least abortion. If Napoleon III supported supported papal infallibility. So, you know, they made a bargain, and that's when it became a sin. It wasn't before that.
I have a question for you. One of the things I was thinking about this week, because I was really nervous, I was like, oh my God, I get to talk to Gloria Steinem for an hour.
Stop it. Stop it.
Well, I know, but now I can say that. So, and I realized that the way when I interview people, the way I got over my anxiety was I thought, I'm just interviewing them. So I decided that I would sabotage this event and actually ask you questions. But I want to actually read one more thing that has to do with what happened after my harrowing experience. I had an abortion in Mexico, because it has to do with everything that I think followed both in your life and mine. And my question to you when I'm done is how you imagine, if you ever imagine, what the world would be like if the women's movement hadn't happened. If you imagine your life, if we had kept going in the realm that it was before the women's movement. So this is very brief, but it is a passage after I had returned from Mexico and was declared okay. Sometime the following spring, I wandered into my first women's liberation rally, part of a tectonic shift that helped haul the Western world into the modern age. I was a white woman of privilege, a middle-class background in America for starts, and the beginning of a college education. But I wasn't immune to the common cruelties of a society where women could still be treated as property or as biblical Jezebels. At 19, with good intentions and above average intelligence, I had a fairly ordinary and entitled life. Here is part of what was ordinary. Already I had encountered academic favoritism and sexual harassment. In a summer job in Amarillo, the boss offered me $1,000 to sleep with him, then threatened to fire me when I said no. I had been taken advantage of, which is what they used to call date rape, and then assaulted by a frat boy I dated. I'd been told that women made lousy lawyers, not aggressive or articulate enough, that chicks who took a stance against the Vietnam War were just looking to get laid, that in fact, getting laid was what we were good for, the start of a long, monochromatic path of motherhood and marital servitude. All these messages were direct but impersonal, embedded tenets that even the smartest or most defiant girl could not ignore. Until we did, which was the first part of the battle. The women I met and allied myself with over the next several years were talented and wild and far more complex than any orthodox definition of who I'd been told women were. And that realization widened the sky and made every day feel like street theater. We threw ourselves across doorways and stormed stages and committed colorful acts of sabotage. But our greatest strategic victory was something interior. The shift when we stopped caring so much what men thought or presumed or demanded. When we turned our attention away from the status quo and toward one another. And that's that amazing. Is dedicated to Gloria Steinem.
Well, you know, this is, how shall I say, this is the magic moment for me, for you, for everyone, when we tell our experience and discover we're not alone in our experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that therefore perhaps we are not wrong or crazy. The system is wrong or crazy. And that is the beginning of every movement, and the continuation of every movement is people telling their stories, discovering shared experience, shared unfairness, and shared jokes and pleasure, and and if we get together, we can maximize the good and minimize the bad together. That's what a social justice movement is. And you say that the women's movement saved your life. It saved my life.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
When did you feel, was there a moment when the penny dropped, when you realized that, in fact, there was this whole world opening that was available that could change your life?
Yes, I think that there were two pennies that dropped. I mean, when I first graduated from college, I went to live in India for a couple of years. And coming back from India made me realize that I was living in a white ghetto. I mean, it made me realize how profoundly racist, racially divided, compartmentalized the country was. And then a little bit later, when I was writing for what was a then new New York magazine, and I had given myself a political column because I'd named all the departments. So I gave myself a political, something to write, since I couldn't write about politics anyplace else. So I went to cover an abortion hearing that was held in a church basement in Manhattan. Abortion was then illegal, exactly as you described.
Mm-hmm.
And women were standing up individually and telling their stories, as you did, about having, needing an abortion and having to go through an illegal procedure and what happened. And I was just there as a reporter, but I realized, wait a minute, this is the first time I have ever heard women telling the truth about something that only happens to women, taking it seriously. And that was the beginning for me, because it just began to unravel everything. If this happens, if this is necessary for so many, why are we not allowed to make decisions over our own bodies?
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of a kind of life-saving sequence of events that came along with just listening to each other's stories, saying, okay, this is wrong, we can fix it. I mean, yes, we were naive in the beginning. I don't think we understood how long it would take, but that's okay. That's how you get educated.
Right.
But it gave my life purpose and meaning and humor and a chosen family. And no, it's wonderful.
And hope, my God. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because you were a few years ahead of me in terms of what you knew when. I was raised in a conservative Bible Belt town in the Texas Panhandle, and I really went from that innocent, introverted bookworm to college with civil rights in Vietnam and the women's movement. And I still remember stumbling literally across my first women's liberation rally and standing there in the Texas sunlight and thinking, oh my God, who are these brash, loud women, and what do they have to say? Right. And I'm sort of looking over my shoulder like, was some guy going to come along and arrest us? And it's extraordinary to me. I mean, I think one of the reasons I wrote this book is that I, at this point in my life, started to look back through the lens of how much the women's movement didn't just change my life, but altered everything about it. And I think it's not that we take that for granted, but we've spent our adult lives with that knowledge. And a lot of young women, I remember hearing a woman not very long ago say, not very long, 5 or 6 years, say, well, I'm not a feminist, but, and I started to hear that as a refrain of sort of young, progressive, but very ahistorical women, as though feminism were some dirty little secret of something that we had done half a century ago. So that is actually what got me started. And then, of course, himself became the occupant, and that fueled my fire even more.
I'm surprised. I mean, there was a long period of time of, I'm not a feminist, but I'm surprised it's still going on, because now among, under 30 men and women, feminism is a good word and it's in the majority, and saying but I think in my experience saying that had to do with women's feeling that if they were feminists, they were somehow anti-men.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Which is ridiculous. Unfortunately, now many men are saying I'm a feminist, so that helps a lot.
But I think that's relatively recent. I would say in the last 5 or 8 years, at least from my experience. One thing I want to ask you is because I was thinking about the different paths that both of our lives have taken in the last several decades. And one of the things I've always admired you for is that you seem to have an extraordinary amount of hope. And I think that it's contagious. And I think it has fueled a lot of what we consider as an activist and progressive path.
Well,
Where do you find that? Where do you keep finding it?
Well, I do call myself a hopeaholic, which is, perhaps I shouldn't, because
I didn't know that, but I wish it were contagious.
But I think hope is a form of planning. And if our hopes weren't already real inside us, we couldn't even hope them. So why on earth would we allow anyone or encourage anyone to give up hopes that is the beginning of action and activism. And it's something that is within our control, or at least more within our control than most things, right? So no, hope is absolutely crucial, because it means that we have a vision of reality inside us that is not quite what we're seeing, and that we can try to make it more real and join with other people who are trying to do that too.
Mm-hmm. Like I say, I wish it were. I mean, I think that that's inspirational. I myself find it hard to hang on to at certain points, and God knows.
Okay, well, I'm not, we all have different experiences, but
you're no Pollyanna, I know that, but
no, but if you're finding it hard to hang on to hope, maybe you need to have a group that I don't know what you want to call it, we used to call them rap groups, remember that? And so, but I mean, just 2 or 3 friends, or men or women, but anybody who shares some of the same hopes and dreams. Mm-hmm. Because if we're losing hope, it's because we don't have companionship.
I do love the notion that hope is another form of planning. I remember saying to someone, and not at all cynically, I said, at a certain point in life, you trade in hope for planning. And I simply meant that you had gotten to a point where you thought, well, I'm not going to go to law school. I'm not going to become a vet. Now I have to think about ABC down the line.
Well, but you're still hoping to become a vet.
Yes, this is true.
And hoping to come, you might get a little more practical than, I was when I thought I was going to be a dancer, which was not that I was going to dance my way out of Toledo into the hearts of it. That was not so practical.
I don't know. It's kind of a lovely idea. I took up rowing when I was almost 50. So
that's great.
There are some things you can do forever.
Yeah. No, if we find ourselves getting hopeless or depressed, or it's very often because we aren't in the company of other people. We only create the famous oxytocin, the tend and befriend hormone, when we are with other human beings.
Are you able to be with other human beings in this alone time?
Well, yes, because I am, first of all, I'm with you, that counts, and lots of other people. Mm-hmm. But also I'm in the country, but because I'm in the country and there are some houses nearby, we can safely see each other. I did spend the first 3 months of lockdown in my apartment in New York without ever hardly leaving my front door.
Oh God.
Yeah. So but it was still, I had this kind of companionship that we have now. But I do think we need it with all five senses. So we need to find safe ways of doing that.
Right.
And people with children have that,
Yes.
With,
and in fact, Tyler, who is in the book, my friend, who is now 10 years old, and I renamed Tyler. I saw on her bicycle recently, and it was the first time. It was right after lockdown, probably 3 weeks, and I'd been able to bear not touching people, and I saw this child I love, and I was like, oh my God! And we stood there like this, She said, "We live in interesting times, Gail." So, that's hard. And I thank God I have a dog, but touching people is really it's probably the thing that I miss the most. I've tried to adapt to the rest of it, but yes, we need, and thank God we can reach out.
There are a lot of ways I think that we can do that in safety. I mean, many people, because they have kids or because they're
right
down together, but I do think that we need that oxytocin, the ability to empathize that comes with oxytocin, and only with that. You can learn intellectually and do many other things, but you can't actually feel what someone else is feeling unless you're present with all five senses.
Right.
You don't have to be touching necessarily, but it's the all five senses possibility.
I have seen old friends on Zoom and burst toward the screen as though I could hug them. It's made me so happy. I feel like I should, my social duty is to share you, because we have so many people, and I know we were going to save some time for people to ask questions. So,
okay. And people should, whoever it is, give us answers too. Don't just ask.
We're looking for answers, multiple choice.
You have answers we don't know, right?
Yeah. And Kate, why don't you take it back and moderate or do whatever you do?
Absolutely. We have a lot of questions, so good thing we have some time for them. All right. The first question we got was from Stephen, who asks, Gail, it's such a deeply revealing and personal book. Did it ever make you angry to write it? Reading it made me angry for you, but your humanity shines on every page.
Oh, thank you, Stephen. What a lovely question and comment. There were a few things that made me angry, pissed off, not enraged, but pissed off. And I think that, and a lot of it made me feel like, oh my God, I get to grab hold of this in a new way. I mean, I think for any writer that ultimately you're the one with the last word, So there were some things that I had thought that I would never write about. A few of them made me sad simply because I look back and I was so young and confused and vulnerable. And I think I was like most women of that time and age. But for a writer, anger is fuel. So it was a good thing to go through. Thanks for your words, Stephen.
We have a question from Megan, who asks, I wonder if either of you have noticed that younger generations often pronounce Ms. as Miss. I am guilty of that. Should we be concerned? Is it worth trying to correct? I love Ms. and I would be sorry to lose it.
Mm-hmm. The Ms. is actually a very old form of address that was also used for children. Mistress and master. We got it out of the Oxford English Dictionary, and its purpose was just to allow us a way of indicating female on forms without marital status. It's much less necessary than it used to be. I think we need it way less. Mm-hmm. But if we're going to say it, we might as well say it as Ms., which is more like MIZ,
Right.
because otherwise you are assigning yourself marital status, in that case, single.
Amen.
I've learned something today too. A question for Gail. Anne says, I've read all your beautifully written memoirs, and I'm wondering how you think your insights about your life have changed as you revisit it at different life stages. How do you face difficult truths differently at 70 as opposed to 50?
God, what a question. Let's talk for 2 hours. I said something actually to someone doing a phone interview this week, and I didn't even realize I'd said it until later. And we were talking about animals. And I said to her, I was describing the intensity for me of the animal experience. And I said, or something like this, it made me think about it, that one of the reasons that I love animals so much is they feel like this almost holy link to the non-human alive world. And I find it even more true during the lockdown, that the places that I draw sustenance, some of it is from other people, but a lot of it is from the natural world. I've spent so much time in my garden, digging in the dirt, watching beautiful things come up, watching them die, which teaches me a lot about how to let go. I find that there is a kind of rue to aging that is probably necessary. And I actually asked an old friend not long ago, because I hadn't seen him in a while, and I said, and we're exactly the same age, and I said, do you feel regret? Do you ever feel regret for like things you didn't do? I don't feel regret for things that I did. I've given myself a pass on a lot of them, but for things that you didn't do. And he said, only a fool would get to this stage in life and not feel some regret. It would suggest that you had never made any mistakes. And I loved that because I think it's true. So I feel that there's a reckoning and a kind of humility about the world, and it's more important to me now to be a kind person in it than probably anything else. So that's a long-winded answer, but yes, probably things have changed. They can't not change.
And I kind of agree on that last note, that kindness may be the most important quality on earth.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Maddie, who asks, what colorful acts of sabotage can we do in our day-to-day lives?
Ooh, that's for Gloria.
Well, I mean, only you know, and we're here to support you.
That's right. And we have a list of good lawyers if you get caught.
No, I mean, because we each can do and invent and get other people to do things that no one else can. So I don't want to dictate what active sabotage, that you should, launch into. That's totally up to you. But it can be as simple as a woman in an audience said to me, as saying to your husband, pick it up yourself.
Exactly.
Or it can be as complicated as deciding to run for a school board or city council or state legislature.
Mm-hmm.
Or it can be, just it's basically, it's challenging what you see that's unfair. And I just want to say to you, it is so much fun that if you just do whatever it is, small or big, get up in the morning. I mean, I wrote a book called Outrageous Acts and Everyday Rebellions because of this questioners like this, because I was just saying, okay, get up in the morning and say to yourself, what outrageous thing am I going to do today? And understand that if it's Monday, by Wednesday, the world will be different.
All right, I have a question for Gail. From Sharon, who asks, can you talk a little bit about your journalism career as a woman? Were there challenges you faced as a woman, either in the newsroom or on the assignments that you were asked to cover?
Wow, that's a great question. Not on the assignments that I was asked to cover. I was very fortunate in that regard. I had a memory that I was telling a friend that is worth sharing in this day and age. When I got hired at the Globe, I was the first woman critic who was on staff. There was another woman who was a dance critic, but she was freelance. An art critic who was also freelance. And one day my editor called me in and said, oh, we're doing this great promo for the art section, and you have to go to the photo op upstairs, and they're going to take a picture and run a huge ad in the Sunday Globe. So I went back to my office and I looked at the list, and it took me about 10 seconds. And I walked back to his office and I said, I don't think you want to run this. This is like 1986, maybe. And he said, why? And I said, because you have 13 people in this ad, and all of them are white, and 12 of them are male. And do you really want to be like announcing the white male hegemony of the criticism section of the Boston Globe?
That's so wonderful that you said that.
And he got completely.
That's an outrageous thing.
It was, but it was also so blatant to me. I was like, oh my God, are you going to advertise it? And they wound up, they did do the ad, and they pulled it after one day because they got so many complaints.
Mm-hmm.
And I think within 10 years, maybe less, I think by now it's a whole different world, but within 10 years, they had probably 40% women and about the same amount people of color.
Mm-hmm.
So that was an interesting thing to have to go through. I feel lucky because I sort of got to do what I wanted to. But if I'd been in sports or politics, I might have had a different trouble.
But it's so important that you did that, and so exemplary for now, because it isn't rocket science, It's just that if we just don't go along with things that don't look like the country,
right?
If we're invited to be on a panel and it doesn't look very representative, you just say, well, couldn't we, and it's fun. It's actually fun and interesting, right? And but I still think that we are not properly crediting. I think about Black Lives Matter as a movement, and I'm not sure that people know that it was 3 young Black feminists who started it, who invented it. And I'm not sure that we still know that cops attack Black women as well as Black men,
mm-hmm.
and often in more severe numbers for various reasons, including prostitution.
I was thinking about that this week in terms of gender and race, and how often during the early days of the women's movement, I think the right tried to use movements against each other. And say, well, feminism is a luxury item compared to racism. And that's an old tactic from the right. And I do think that we forget that, in fact, being afraid of cops does not just belong to Black men. It belongs to Black women too, because they're seen as a quality of disposable or less threatening. So yeah, I think those differences are subtle and profound, and they have to be addressed.
And to women in general. I'm here in California now, and I'm pretty sure that the great Congresswoman Maxine Waters, when she was a member of the California State Assembly here, had to pass legislation to keep cops from imposing internal exams on women stopped for traffic stops. I'm just saying. Okay. Maxine can fact check me on this, but some legislative effort she had to. So, you know, it's not a competition of tears.
Right.
It's we're all trying to, and many white guys and cops too, you know, are trying to get out of this hierarchical craziness.
We have a question from Stephanie on a different note. When I was in college, my mom gave me a copy of Revolution from Within. Now I have twin daughters who hope to begin college in September. What books or other resources would you recommend for young women at similar turning points in life?
Well, there's so many. Gail's book, because it's a journey. It's a journey I recognize, and I bet, you know, lots and lots of women would recognize. I think you can't go wrong with anything by Alice Walker, fiction or essay.
Or Toni Morrison.
Or Toni Morrison, right? Or Robin Morgan, all of her essays. No, that's one of the great things that's happened, really. There are a wealth of books. And in the end of, for the end of Revolution from Within, I put a section called Bibliotherapy, which was, you know, all books that I thought would be helpful. And that book is being reissued, so I'm going to add books. So you or anybody listening who has books that have been very helpful, I hope you tell me.
All right, Gail, I have a question for you from Jane. Why did you name the book Bright Precious Things?
It's actually was an accidental line that came at the end of my story about the abortion. And now I have to read it. It's only a paragraph. I feel like that one of the things the women's movement gave me, I who was teetering on self-destructive behavior, some would say closer to the cliff than teetering. I feel like that I got from the interior shift that feminism gave me, I found the realization that my life was worth saving and that it was not defined by men. It was not defined by marriage. It was not defined by competitive bullshit with other women. That in fact, there was this kernel of self-regard that I could see in other women in the women's movement that I was able eventually to give myself. And I think that that was probably the thing that lasted my whole life. I mean, it helped me get sober, which I did 30-something years ago. It helped me decide that my life was worth saving. And I have often said before that I felt like that when I made those choices, that it was like light was eclipsing darkness, sometimes by half an inch. But that was an amazing and life-saving, for me, transformation. And what after I came back from Mexico and I was okay, I got a medical checkup, I was 19 years old. And I wrote this paragraph. After I finished at the health center, I walked over to the Nighthawk. Anybody in Austin will remember the Nighthawk. It was a legendary place, a local restaurant on 19th Street that bordered the UT campus and had the comfort of good food and leather booths. I sat in a booth and ordered coffee with milk, a large Coke, and a chicken dinner that could feed a football player. Then I walked out into the Texas sunshine, well and home, and my eyes teared with thanks for the bright, precious thing that was my life. A few weeks later, I was fitted for an IUD. So that's where it came from. And I was also writing about Tyler, this amazing child who I should say before we close, that this amazing child who I feel like was this piece of stardust that fell into my life. And we spent a couple of years of her genesis into this. The wonderful thing about kids is when you watch them discover the world, they are the embodiment of hope. And she was certainly that for me and still can be. And so when I was finishing the book, I thought, there's another bright, precious thing that is very emblematic of what this title means. So in that regard, it works in a myriad ways.
And I so love that your book tells us that cross-generational friendships and relationships are crucial. Because
so much.
One of the many ways we are still segregated is by age. And it's so not right that we have older communities and, we need each other across all those age ranges. And we need all living things, that your relationship with your dog is so clearly what every Native American, ceremony that I've ever been to starts out with, honoring all the four directions and the four-footed and the winged and the two-legged and this, and all our relations. And that our world is not complete without that.
Amen. That's so true.
All right. I think we have time for a couple more, maybe two more. There are so many questions. I don't know if you guys can see how many there are, but this is hard.
Well, we can't see, so it's
okay, lucky you. So
you get to be the editor, Kate.
All right. One of these is a wonderful comment I just wanted to read. I really loved it. Elliot writes, "Thrilled to see two such great Americans inspiring all of us. To me, both Miss Caldwell and Miss Steinem are great human beings and have vaulted out of any categories. Isn't this the goal of feminism or any movement? To establish as sacred our common humanity, so exemplified by these two wise, calm, and honest truth tellers." I thought that was nice.
Thank you, Elliot. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no, I'd go for human. That's okay. And the only reason that we are still categorizing is that we're trying to make all the categories okay and equal. But I agree that human is what's important, right?
All right, we have a question, Gail, from Avide, who asks, so I've read all your books and this one has the most underlined passages. Can you say more about the moment in the book when you shared your Me Too moment with friends? And taking a broader view, can you and Gloria both speak to the surge of activism we are currently living in?
Okay, well, I'm going to have to ask you to repeat the part about, can I speak to?
Can you say more about the moment in the book when you shared your Me Too moment with friends?
Oh, I suspect I know what she's talking about. There's a moment that I describe with two good men friends, and it was right when the Me Too stuff was breaking, and every woman I knew was going, oh, well, do we count the flashers? Do we count this? Do we count this? Do we count the guy who tried to grab your breast, but you got away from him in a bar? And so, there were the minor ones that women didn't even count, and then there were the major ones that you did. And I was talking to two men friends, both of whom I trusted enormously, and I remember, and I had this sort of tough girl humor veneer, saying that everybody I knew had gotten to like 20 before they stopped. And one of the men looked at me with this just heartbreak in his eyes and said, "Oh my God, I had no idea. I had no idea. I'm so sorry that happened to you." And I had not even told him the big ones. I'd just been going A, B, C. And I think that he and the other man were stunned at the level of ordinary, shall we call it, invasion that women, as a matter of course, experienced. And that was completely, and I remember saying to him, once again, trying to make light of it, I said, why do you think I walk around with a 50-pound dog? It levels the playing field. It was really true. So, yeah, that was a moment of.
Well, it's good that you say that, because I do think that it is certainly it's not all men, and I think it's a relatively small proportion of men who are hooked on dominance, and so and actually it's a relatively small proportion of men who ever pay for sex too, who believe that women are there to be prostituted. So I think one of the things that needs to happen is that the good men need to look out for and do something about the not so good men.
Right. And I also think that women implicitly or consciously didn't tell men a lot of these stories. Like what it's like I say, somebody saying to me, honey, it happened to everybody. It's like, what? So there, I think that one of the great things about the Me Too movement is that men began to realize, all the good men, which are the majority, began to realize how much women had taken it on the cuff and not said anything about it. So,
and there was often a penalty for saying something about it, because there were many years when it was, well, what did you say? Why were you there? Why did you have a drink? What did, why were you in that neighborhood?
What were you thinking wearing a skirt that short?
Yeah, I mean, part of what sexism and racism share is blaming the victim.
Sure.
All right. There's a lot of love for your dog here, Gail. Also. Okay, I want to respect both of your time, so I'm going to make this the last question. I wish I could ask all of these. They're really amazing. So we're going to end on, Karen asks, how do we keep the issues that women are still fighting for at the forefront during this time? I fear that we might go backwards post-COVID. I think you could say that also about the Black Lives Matter movement and a lot of the protest and civil unrest happening in this time.
I would like to hear what Gloria has to say about that.
Well, I mean, let's just say COVID is a huge consciousness raiser. COVID does not give a damn whether you are white or black or male or female or rich or poor. All the, excuse me, all the false labels. I mean, nothing should have taught us more sharply, more dramatically, that we are all human, as the earlier questioner was saying, than this pandemic. So I hope that we are, I believe, learning, it's changing our consciousness also about national boundaries, which it doesn't respect. So I hope and believe that because of this, some simple things will be not now a matter of course, like national health care, because clearly everyone's health is dependent on other people's health, but also the artificiality of adjectives applied to human will be way, way, way more evident, and I hope we begin to dispense with them. And we get two things: we get to be humans and we get to be unique. So we have our unique selves that we were born with, that could never happen again or never happened before. And we have a name, an individual name, and we're humans. True, we need to make the group names okay, so we're not going to abandon them. But I think that this pandemic is helping us envision a world beyond them.
I also want to say one thing. I was recording my book inside my closet for 3 days, and it was the week that George Floyd was killed, and I knew about it. I think it was a Tuesday, and when I came out on Friday, I felt like the world had exploded. And I said to a friend, I can't remember feeling this many contradictory emotions in my own body ever, because I was exhilarated, but I was horrified and enraged and heartbroken and scared about COVID and everything else. But then I saw these pictures in Amsterdam and Paris and Germany, and I was like, oh my God, the world just woke up. The world just said no more. And guess what? We're all in it together. And I think Gloria is absolutely right. I think COVID has made us realize that death is the great democratizer, and that there's been a way in which that we have felt our humanity in a way that I pray will keep us going. So
That was beautiful.
I want to thank everybody for being here. It's really wonderful to know that you're all there, and my God, to get to spend an hour with Gloria Steinem. So
no, and thank you, and thank you, and thank you for ending on the perfect note. And thank you for writing a book that is, in my view, better than all those Plato folks, those philosophers I read, because it is infinitely humane, accessible, not putting itself in a hierarchy, and it is at the same time as valuable as any big philosophical book.
What a wonderful note to end on. I'll close things out. Thank you again tremendously to both Gail and Gloria. And thank you to everyone watching at home. We know you're there, even though we can't see you in person. Thank you for spending your evening with us. Please learn more about this memoir and purchase Bright Precious Thing at the link that I have provided in the chat. So on behalf of Harvard Bookstore here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, have a good night, everyone. Please keep reading and please be well.
Thank you.